2 minutes. It's ready to go. Oh, all right, now I can talk.
We just not, maybe our systems aren't updated, but have you seen a statement of intent or business?
No, so the end of that.
I'm sorry, this one we're not hearing today. And
Oh, we're not. Okay.
I'm sorry, I put in a,
That's okay.
that's an old one, used today's. Six five ninety-five switched to next week, and there was no fiscal on LR 22.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry,
All
this
right.
is-
Okay. We got you. See, look at Stan. He was 2 weeks ahead of us.
Not ready to kill it. Not even up
Do we have people in the hallways and stuff?
No, there's people sitting out there.
These back.
There's a lot out there.
Anybody's like, yeah, I'm gonna grab
6,
them.
7.
I think like 15 to 20 are out there.
And they're all here for you. They're all here
They're all here
for Senator Duncan.
Not believe they will all be testifying.
Mine, grab these back.
You will be staying with me another time.
Yes, we'll find out.
I don't.
Grab them back.
back over there.
What's that?
We were doing 81.
Oh,
Sure, you talking about this one, you and Jacobson?
yeah.
Yeah, no. I'm heading back over there. I'll be at the next.
Was there a lot of testifiers on 81?
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of people there. On 81?
Taxes.
For it, right?
Most.
Yes.
We haven't gotten to the opponents yet, so I don't know.
What we talked about this morning.
I get it started, it's gonna go long.
No, we gotta let these people get in here. Look, there's a bunch of them sitting up there. Let's get them in the
missing year.
chair. A lot of them are going to testify. We'll be all right.
And I'm
We gotta wait for Decay to get one.
You have your LA water. Or are
I
they
should
near,
get close by the time
they're
I'm.
near in the end?
I hope.
Have fun.
So you got two less senators here in this question. Perez is leaving, Stan's leaving, Moser's smiling.
I'm just a happy camper.
We're just seeing if we can get everybody in here. I think he can. Scott's gonna pack them in.
Well, you could take a halftime and let them swap some people if they wanted to or something.
Hey, Camden.
Like I said, it's
Did you want Camden?
Senator,
Did you want Camden?
Is that everybody? Close the door.
okay, give me 1 second.
Okay, we gotta wait for Sally here.
I'm gonna turn the mics are back on and the recorder is back on.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Natural Resources Committee. Welcome, Senator Duncan. You are cleared to proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Brandt and Natural Resources Committee members. I am Senator George Dungan, Georgedungan. I represent Legislative District 26 in Northeast Lincoln, and today I am proud to introduce to you LR 22CA, or as it's more commonly referred to, the Green Amendment. This past October, I attended my second Nebraska Youth Climate Summit. Of the many great speakers that were there, one stood out in particular, and that was Miss Sheridan Macy. Miss Sheridan Macy is an attorney, a Nebraska native, and I think she mentioned earlier today she actually used to be a tour guide for this capital and was a page as well, so she has quite a bit of familiarity with this capital. And she presented at the Nebraska Youth Climate Summit about the Green Amendment. Multiple conversations and Zoom meetings followed, and now here we are today. Once I wrap this up, you will also hear from Ms. Sheridan Macy herself. The Green Amendment is a book that's authored by Maya K. Van Rossum. Her book is the catalyst for this legislation, and as of right now, there are 3 states, New York, Pennsylvania, and Montana, that have adopted Green Amendments with different language and in different ways. At least 9 states are currently considering this legislation. The Nebraska Green Amendment will allow the people of Nebraska to proactively protect our environment, communities, and state economy. Our state constitution provides the overarching legal structure, principles, and obligations to which all state government actions must conform. A Nebraska Green Amendment will ensure that all of the government in the state, including the branches of government at both the state and the local level, will work to advance proactive environmental protection at every level of the decision-making process. A Nebraska Green Amendment will help ensure that existing environmental laws and regulations are implemented to their full potential. It will also provide a basis for advancing new needed protections through legislation, regulation, or other government action, and will provide a basis to secure protective government action when a gap in the law is identified. The Nebraska Green Amendment will legally rank the right to a clean and healthy environment alongside other fundamental rights such as property, private property rights, free speech, and religious freedom. When two rights, such as property and environment, are implicated by government action, the government must work then to balance and protect both sets of rights. To deviate from my testimony real quick, I've heard already some opposition comments regarding what this possibly could do, and I want to clarify what the purpose of a constitutional amendment is. As I'm sure many in this room understand, our Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights portion, enshrines rights for individuals. What this bill does not do is create a private right of action against another citizen. The same way that you can't sue me for stifling your speech under the First Amendment, you would not be able to, for example, sue a neighbor who's using a fertilizer you don't like or something like that. The goal of this is to provide protections to individuals against government action that is taken that infringes on the principles enshrined in this provision. The provision is specifically made up of language that's been taken from other amendments that have been implemented in other states. People behind me are far more experts than I am, so please save some of your logistical questions for them. But amendments in Pennsylvania and Montana and New York all have different parts of the language that is included in what we've included here. The reason that some of the specific language is included, such as self-executing language, the necessity to ensure, for example, abundant native flora and fauna, and a healthy environment, all come out of case law that has sort of been derived from a number of these other cases in Montana specifically, but also New York and Pennsylvania. This is not a new idea. In Montana and Pennsylvania, I believe their amendments were adopted in the 70s, and it was in 2021 that New York joined them in adopting their own Green Amendment as well. Many states, including Nebraska, do include provisions that pertain to hunting, fishing, and the right to utilize those. However, the language of this seeks to make it so this amendment would actually essentially have teeth to it. Many of the states that have so-called environmental protections in their constitutions are toothless in that it doesn't allow any individual to actually bring a cause of action if the government infringes on those rights. This seeks to provide, again, individuals the option to defend against government action that's taken that impends on these rights. As you can see, there are many people here today in support of the Green Amendment. We have folks here from all across the state and others who have come to Nebraska because they're so excited about this. I specifically want to make sure that they have the time to talk here today and explain why they're so excited about it. I've been incredibly encouraged by the youth that I've worked with in getting this whole day organized. We had a press conference earlier, there was a rally. It really is amazing to see people get involved. And so I will generally defer to them here today and let them speak, because I think when we're talking about protecting our environment and protecting our world, it's the future generations that we need to care about, not just us. So with that, I will stop talking, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Okay, let's see what we've got. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman Brandt. Thanks for bringing this bill, Senator Duggan. I'm hearing it's not yet from individual to individual, but we've got a nitrate issue, right, with some of our water. So you're saying that everybody has a right to pure water. So let's say I bought some land out near Seward, Nebraska, and I go to dig my well, and my well has a higher than 10 parts per milliliter concentration of nitrates in it. Is that something that then now I can turn and do something to the state because of that, or is it more the state did something specific to?
The way that I understand it would be the latter of the two. So in other states where cases like this have been brought, specifically, you might hear about this later, but there was a Montana case where essentially the government made a decision. And for example, granting a mining permit or something like that, that then a suit was brought and can say that the permit that was granted violates the rights under that Green Amendment. So you wouldn't just be able to bring a cause of action without actually being able to prove that it was government action or decisions by the government that were unconstitutional.
Okay, but so in that case, let's say that the state of Nebraska, and we do has permitted or given a permit for one of the feedlots in a county, and then that feedlot didn't follow, broke the rules and didn't do a containing pit, whatever.
Well, I will defer that to the attorneys who are going to be testifying after me, who I
Okay.
think have a little bit more experience in that. One thing that I think is important to keep in mind is this is not a novel concept. So there are many cases that can be drawn on in determining the case law to see what does and doesn't apply. I don't personally have a good example here in Nebraska right now of a particular case that this would apply to. Again, I think it's more proactive and protective at this point, but I do think that the people coming after me might be able to answer that.
Okay, and if I may, just one more thing. You say pure water, clean air. Do we have a definition of what that is?
So again, a lot of the case law that's already out there defines that. I mean,
Okay.
in our Constitution, we use a number of languages, but the difference between our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and then statute is there's not usually definition sections. So if you go through, for example, and look at the Nebraska Constitution protections for due process, that's not defined in the Constitution. You just go and look at the case law to determine what the courts have previously used as definitions. And I think in the case of Nebraska, if we were to implement this, the courts would be able to look at Montana, Pennsylvania, and other states where there's been a multitude of litigation in making determinations of those definitions.
It does seem though that a lot of our bills starting now are doing a lot of intent and definition language prior to.
Right.
I don't,
We
because
don't-
I think prior it was, go back to old statutes
Right.
and review, but
That's generally different in a constitutional amendment.
because it's a constitution.
Yeah, so if this was
Okay.
an LB and we were creating statute, I think that's oftentimes where you put in that intent
I'm not
language.
a lawyer, so.
Well, I'm just a criminal defense lawyer, so this is all new to me too. But that's why I would defer your questions to the other experts. The one thing I will add is in the states that have implemented this, what we've seen is not some floodgate opening. So my understanding is in the states that have implemented this, you see anywhere between 3 to 10 cases a year that are brought, which is not a lot in the broader scheme of the court system. My understanding is none of those have ever been dismissed with summary judgment saying they were frivolous. So the notion that this is going to open up some floodgate to just a multitude of cases has not borne out in the states where this has been
But
implemented.
would those cases have been brought without that in their constitution?
Again, I don't know the specifics of the
So it's
statutes.
10 cases that wouldn't have been brought.
But none of them were frivolous. And I think that that's important to note. In the case where they're not frivolous, that means that looking at the facts on the face of it, there's clearly enough evidence to proceed in the case. And in fact, like I said, in Montana, the courts have found in favor of the folks who brought that case. So there were good reasons to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? You'll stick around to close?
I would love to.
That would be terrific.
We got all day.
All right, so now I'm going to ask, how many people are here to testify in support? Raise your hand. How many people are opposed? Raise your hand. Okay. Well, yeah, I think to start the hearing, we'll go 2 proponents, 2 opponents, and then when we run out of opponents, it'll pretty much just be the proponents. This is typically how we do a hearing like this, where it's pretty lopsided. So, proponents, who is a proponent of this CA? Please come up. Three minutes, yes, we're doing 3 minutes, yeah, just so everybody knows. I think we announced that at the beginning of the hearing if you weren't in the room. Welcome to the Natural Resources Committee.
Hi, my name is Sheridan Macy, Sheridan Macy. I'm here to speak in support of LR22CA. I am an attorney from Omaha who helped draft the language for this bill and one of the people who brought it to Senator Dungin for introduction. The Green Amendment gives Nebraskans the right to a clean and healthy environment, supporting legal action when that right is violated, whether this be by government action or inaction. In the states where such amendments already exist, the law has enabled communities to push back against a number of environmental harms, including those posed by improper waste management, fossil fuels, and contamination of drinking water. The latter of these is a really important issue in Nebraska, as we've mentioned already, which the state government has failed to adequately address to this point. Nitrate contamination already costs the state millions of dollars in tax money for water treatment each year. It's contributed to a number of health issues, including multiple kinds of cancer. Nebraska actually has the 7th highest pediatric cancer rate in the country. And a Nebraska Green Amendment is a tool of accountability for exactly this kind of environmental harm. The amendment enables the Nebraska state government to address these problems more proactively by requiring adequate attention be given to environmental impacts in policymaking. And if the state fails to proactively protect Nebraskans, the amendment allows those people experiencing environmental harm as a result to take legal action. It is the duty of the state government to protect and serve the Nebraska people. When the state is not doing its duty, which in the case of environmental issues, there are a number of instances where it has not been, it is up to the Nebraska people to hold the government to those responsibilities. The Green Amendment enables communities to do just that. Although this amendment does enable Nebraskans to sue the government, it has not led to an influx in any of the 3 states where this exists of lawsuits, nor has it had any measurable negative economic impacts. In fact, the Green Amendment may enable Nebraska to save money in the long term by avoiding creating environmental harms in the first place, and by protecting the natural resources and ecosystems which are vital to our agriculture, energy, and tourism industries. We've talked a lot about hunting and fishing already today. Those are both things that would be protected under this. On a more personal note, I grew up going to see the Sandhill Cranes with my Nana multiple times, kayaking and tanking with my family out in Mullen, and traipsing through various state parks and wildlife refuges. I want to be able to show future generations of my family the natural beauty of my home state, but without some serious action on the part of the state government, like the implementation of a Green Amendment, I am concerned I will not have that option. Nebraska is and was a great place to grow up and to raise a family. This is one of the big selling points of our state, to prevent ongoing brain drain especially. But if we do not take steps to preserve our environment, that will not continue to be true. This is an issue young people care about, and if Nebraska decision makers do not start listening to that, we will continue to leave the state in large numbers. I ask that you advance this bill to both support the environmental protection necessary for the well-being of the state and to support the well-being of the people and their access to a tool of government accountability. I'm happy to take whatever questions you have. I am a lawyer, so I can answer some of those that you had earlier.
Okay, let's see what we've got for questions. Senator Rabel.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Macy. Can you tell us a little bit about how and what tools do people have to hold that political subdivision or the state accountable?
Do you mean generally as like existing now?
In general and legally?
I mean, the most obvious is voting. People also do have the ability to sue their government in certain situations, depending on the regulation, depending on what causes of action are available. With environmental law, this is an issue because there aren't really a whole lot of causes of action which are still available to individuals. A lot of those have been taken away by previous court decisions, which have kind of made that tool of accountability not as accessible. More of the legislative electoral process tools, those are really good and useful for people like elections, but in issues like this where, for instance, nitrates have been a problem for 40 years, we've known about them for 40 years, we know they're causing cancers, elections haven't really seemed to change much, so having an additional tool that people can use to get access to clean water is something that is very helpful and important.
Sure.
Just to follow up, so you probably read and have heard a lot about Mead, Nebraska, and the contamination that has happened, and the runoff, and the noxious smells, and so on. So, in a brief moment, can you tell us how you think that should have been handled? What could the citizens and the folks that live around Mead, what could have and should have they done differently, as well as what could have the state done differently?
So I'm not sure that I can speak to what the citizens necessarily could have done differently, but in terms of the state, there have been similar cases around especially noxious odors in other states which have green amendments. And so having a green amendment has enabled those communities to both prevent the causes of that noxious odors, or to have the government step in and impose additional regulation to assist in that. So For example, with that plant, having some additional regulations about what kind of contamination can be going into the water and at what amount. And if that's not met, then you have fines. And that's how, for instance, one of the New York cases was addressing a waste treatment plant which was leaking sewage and noxious odors into the nearby community. When they sued, they were able to get the state government to work with that treatment plant to address those issues and to reduce both the smell and some of the noxious contamination coming out of the plant. So in part, it'll help the government just continue to enforce its existing regulations that they might not necessarily be bringing to bear. But also there are additional regulations that may be necessary that don't already exist. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Chair Brandt. So you probably heard what I asked Senator Duncan before. If you get, so 2 issues, I go dig a well myself, it has nitrates in it over the amount. Is that something that's would fit into this? And then the state has granted a permit to.
Yeah, so on your first question, I would say that if that is something, that nitrate in the water is something that is caused by lack of government action, say lack of sufficient regulation, then you would potentially have the ability to sue the
So who would
government.
determine that? Because that potentially, those nitrates in there were from 40 years ago.
I mean, that would be part of the legal process in determining whether or not the case goes through. Doing research into what caused the nitrates, whether or not it would have been prevented by a regulation at this point.
And I guess who would determine that? I
It
feel like
would be a
that-
judicial decision. It would
Yeah.
involve a lot of bringing in of experts. You'd have
Okay.
essentially a trial that would go with that.
Okay.
So. For your second question regarding like the vagueness of the language, that kind of vagueness of language is true of any constitutional right. Your right to free speech doesn't define what's considered speech. It doesn't define what's considered free. It doesn't define the different places in which you're able to speak. But we have a ton of case law, both federal and state, that points out and explains, here are your different public forums where you have X rights of freedom of speech, and how in each of these different places that speech may be limited. So like those kinds of vague terms in a constitutional amendment are deliberately designed to be more wide, both to encapsulate a lot of different issues that might come up, but also because they're going to be defined later by judicial proceedings and potentially by legislative history discussions.
Okay, and then, sorry, there was what, in between, like if the state had granted a permit to a feedlot and then the feedlot had not done all the things that they were supposed to do.
The feedlot would be obligated to either do the things that it's supposed to do according to the law.
But that, and
or
that
you
happens
would-
today.
It does happen today, and that is an existing,
Yeah, and I guess
legal
that's,
cause of
a
action.
little bit where I'm at, like, too, we have the NDEE.
Yes.
And that's, their job is really to follow through and they go out, I mean, my husband owns a manufacturing company and we've got the EPA, we've got, you know, other entities that come in and they do air checks and water checks, and there's many, many rules and guidelines. What makes this different, I guess? Why do we need this on top of that?
so for a lot of the regulations, at least at the federal level, there are Supreme Court decisions which prevent individuals from making any kind of case on that. And so if the government does not choose to pursue that case itself, which often they do not if they don't have the resources or the time or the energy, then that case might just not be addressed, and someone may have to continue living with a power for a feedlot that's violating regulations.
Because in these cases, another individual can't say, hey,
Yes.
they're not following the EPA guidelines
Yeah.
or the.
You would not have individuals standing in a lot of those kinds of cases to be able to bring that, whereas
Okay,
this would
that
give you that ability.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
it's essentially just a bolstering.
Any more questions?
Questions, please.
Senator Juarez.
Thank you. So I'm trying to understand the way that the ballot language has been written when it says state and political subdivisions shall serve as trustees. So if someone wanted to bring, you could call it a cause of action, is that how you said it? How would we determine, I mean, would both these entities be the ones that you would go against, or it depends on what the issue is, whether or not you're going against a state or you're going against a political subdivision? Could you clarify that for me?
Yeah, it would depend on what the issue is, and that would also be something that would be decided when the case is brought to courts. A lot of times people bringing cases tend to be over-inclusive in their choice of people they're suing, and so they may choose to do both the state and the city, or both the state and the subdivision, but in a court that may just be knocked down to one or the other, or it may be kept at both. It kind of depends on what the situation is. And it would depend too on who has the responsibility for whatever issue is occurring.
Okay.
In terms of city and municipal things on here, this has actually been used in Pennsylvania, at least, as a tool to bolster municipal autonomy. So it can really kind of depend on what the issue is that's being used.
Okay, thank you.
I see no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next, proponent. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brandt and members of the Natural Resource Committee. My name is Evelina Sain, EVALINASAIN, and I'm the Executive Director of Students for Sustainability, speaking today on behalf of our members in the broader Nebraska youth community as a proponent of LR22CA. I would like to begin by drawing attention to a particular line in this legislative resolution. The state and each subdivision thereof shall serve as trustee of the natural resources of Nebraska and shall conserve, protect, and maintain such resources for the benefit of all the people, including present and future generations. Future generations. The youth in this audience embody the weight of that phrase. We sit before you because we want to believe that our state is willing to invest in our futures, not only by preserving the health of our environment, but also by recognizing the growing political and economic importance of environmental priorities to my generation. The U.S. Census Bureau's 2022 community survey data revealed that Nebraska experiences an alarming annual net loss of nearly 5,000 individuals with bachelor's, graduate, or professional degrees, and that this, quote, has been on the rise since 2010, signaling a concerning pattern, end quote. Yet in 2024, Forbes ranked Omaha as the best city in the country to move to. This contradiction largely stems from the diverging priorities of our state and the young people residing within it. A lack of career opportunities in environmental fields has harmed both these parties. However, this amendment has the potential to echo the passions of the youth while also spurring job opportunities and permitting resource management, policy, and beyond. Take, for example, the renewable energy sector. In 2022, state grant awards led to expanded energy saving initiatives, driving a 4% increase in clean energy jobs, twice the growth rate of the overall economy, according to Nebraska Public Media. Greater investment in conservation efforts is not just an environmental necessity, it's a direct investment in Nebraska's youth and economic vitality. While environmental progress is a moral imperative, it is also a pragmatic one. According to an analysis by Pale Blue Dot, the organization leading the development of the Omaha City Climate Action Plan, every $1 invested in climate action yields an average return of $4 through climate resilient infrastructure, job creation, and disaster mitigation. That is a 400% return on investment. So when I say that this investment is an investment in our future, I mean both a moral and financial investment. Reversing brain drain, stimulating job creation, and retaining youth talent are all implicit in its passage. My own desire to remain in Nebraska for my post-secondary education has been dampened by legislative inaction and delayed progress in sustainable advancement. I plan to pursue environmental law, a field that will not thrive in a region where environmentalism is inherently politicized. And I'm not alone. The talent exodus from Nebraska can be directly linked to a failure to embrace forward-thinking politics. On behalf of Students for Sustainability and the broader network of young Nebraskans, I urge you to consider the profound impact this legislation could have on our state's future. And I'm open for any questions.
Okay, let's see what we've got for questions. Senator Hughes.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman Brandt. Thanks for coming in. I love seeing young faces out there. This is not, I never did anything like that when I was y'all's age, so.
But you were recycling.
I am a recycling person. Yeah, I am all over that. So you guys can come talk on my recycling bill on batteries. But you said legislative inaction here makes you maybe want to leave the state. Can you give me any specifics on that, on what you're looking at? Because I feel like we have done some things that are very good for the environment. I don't think any of us want, not clean air, not clean water. And then my second side to that, there's 3 other states that have passed something like that. So are you only going to move to those 3 states? So there you go. Those are my questions.
No, I think actually I am moving to New York next year, but not because it has a Green Amendment. But maybe if I tell you that, it will, I don't know, sway you. But no, I think there has been substantial progress within the state, and I am very glad to see that with Students for Sustainability, we go to Washington, D.C., and we have the opportunity to talk to senators, and they've been very reciprocal, and we've had productive conversations. But I think comparatively to states on like the East Coast or the West Coast, there is just a greater amount of action and support. And I think a lot of the legislation that does circulate in those states correlates with increased industry and job expansion within environmental fields. And I think that is very, very important to the youth. And I think that seeing the legislative support and involvement of our representatives is also notable, because it makes us feel like our representatives are safeguarding our passions and our future. Like, climate change is an increasing and emerging interest for young voters and all those involved in civic engagement. So I think it speaks a lot to how the representatives consider youth voices within the state. And as for specific examples, I think the Green Amendment serves as an adequate one in itself.
Well, we were just introduced to it now, so
Yes.
it wasn't like we had it last year and didn't talk about it.
Yes, I completely understand. But
So that leads me to one more question, if I may, just because this is another interest of mine and an interest of this committee, energy policy. Where are you at with nuclear?
that's interesting. I think there are some controversial opinions on nuclear, especially with like the recent events in Michigan, and I think it has the potential to do a lot in our state for things like job creation, but I think that there are some necessary steps to regulating and ensuring that standards are being met before it's integrated into a state's energy portfolio. But I think
you know
that,
we have nuclear.
yes,
Yeah,
I do. But I think it's a great opportunity for expansion. I think the amount of power it can produce, and it's so consolidated, I think it provides potential for a lot of economic investment within the state.
Thank you. Thanks for
Yes,
coming.
of
That's
course.
really great.
Thank you.
I believe Senator Juarez, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. First of all, I would like to say welcome to all of you that have come today. Honestly, I have to admit that I haven't even heard of your group before. So it's extremely impressive that all of you have attended this, and you seem far more knowledgeable in the topic areas I'm sure that you're concerned about than I am, which is one of the things that I appreciate being appointed to the Natural Resources Committee, because I am learning a tremendous amount of information about concerns for, our state and the environment. And I just want to encourage you to continue to communicate, with me anyway. I don't know if anybody else, how much they have room on their plates for more feedback, but I'm new to the legislature, and I welcome your feedback. And I just wanted to let you know that there is a tool that you might not be aware of called Poll the Vote, where you might be able to get your opinions out there and get feedback from people about issues that concern you. And I am in District 5, which is in South Omaha, and I don't know if any of you are from that district. And the other South Omaha representative is Janixi Goreka, and he is where Mr. Vargas's old district is, so some of you might be from that area. And we're going to have a town hall in April. So if you want to keep in touch with our offices, we can let you know about that, and you can come and provide us more feedback on other issues that might be concerning to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Oh, Senator Duquesne.
Thank you. Just to touch a little bit more on nuclear, where do you think nuclear plays a part if we're going to have carbon-free generation in the state as far as electricity?
Where do I think nuclear plays a part in that? I think there's a lot to consider with nuclear, and I think having the necessary infrastructure in place first is a prerequisite to even considering that, but I think it does have the potential to not only mitigate the impacts of climate change and carbon emissions, but I think it is again an area of economic investment for the state. And so I think it's sort of twofold. I think there's a lot of potential within that industry, but I think it's a future consideration for the state. And I think in Nebraska specifically, it's not something that has been as fervently pursued as other energy policies, but.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like we announced earlier, we're going to do 2 proponents and 2 opponents. Opponents, if you're opposed to this. Welcome.
Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Bagley, D-A-V-E-B-E-G-L-E-Y. I'm an attorney in Omaha. I'm also the special Knox County attorney, but I'm not appearing here in that capacity. I'm a graduate of Creighton University and the Creighton University School of Law from 1982. I remember Senator Rabel from undergrad. It was obvious then she was going to be a star. In my opinion, this is, and I want to be real clear about this, this is the most extreme and expensive bill that has been ever offered in the unicameral. You've got a budget deficit right now. If this amendment passes and is in our Constitution, our budget deficit will absolutely skyrocket. What will happen is that every liberal lawyer in Omaha and Lincoln, and there's plenty of them, will file lawsuit against the state of Nebraska. And
Excuse me, there can be no outbursts. If there are, you'll be removed. Does everybody understand that? Treat everybody with respect. Please continue.
And the lawsuit will be for breach of the trustee's duty. The Sierra Club has a staff of 45 lawyers, and they will line up and start filing lawsuits. You know, Senator Hughes said 3 to 10. Well, it's, you know, that's a big deal if you're out in Cherry County or whatever. And the caption of the lawsuit will be Sierra Club versus State of Nebraska. And Senator Duncan asserted that there'd be no implied right of action for citizen versus the state. I don't know. I wouldn't bet on that. I wouldn't bet on that one bit. I have actually filed a lawsuit for a breach of a trustee's duty in Furnace County, and I won it. And I'll tell you right now, NEBREV Stat 30-3893 allows for attorney's fees in the event of a lawsuit. The first lawsuit has been kind of referred to here is for a breach of duty to provide clean water and healthy soils. The left-wing Flat Water Free Press ran a series of stories claiming Nebraska's rural water supply had been poisoned by nitrates from normal farming activities. Safe climate means net zero will be the law of the state. Our electric rates will triple. And last week we had super cold weather. I didn't feel safe. Can I sue the state of Nebraska because it wasn't a safe climate? I think so. Diverse floral and fauna. We've got way too much corn, wheat, and soybean ground in Nebraska. State of Nebraska should use the power of eminent domain, condemn at least 5% of our ag land, and turn it into butterfly farms and virgin prairie. Rather than passing this bill, I think it'd be a lot cheaper for the unicameral to send some of these Sierra Club people to Santa Monica. They can go down to the beach and say, tide, stop coming in, just like what King Canoe tried to do centuries ago. They'll find out mankind cannot control the climate. So again, if this legislative resolution becomes the law, the state will be on the hook for millions in attorney's fees and billions in damages.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions. Do we have questions? No questions? I don't see any, Mr. Bagley. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next, opponent. Are there anybody else opposed to this legislation?
Are you doing neutral?
We will, well, are you neutral? We will go to neutral next. And then we'll go back to the proponents.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Welcome. We'll try and talk quiet here.
Oh, you're totally fine. We train them to sleep even when it's loud, right?
Okay.
Okay. My name is Allie Bush, A-L-L-I-E-B-U-S-H. I represent the grassroots group, Nebraskans Against Government Overreach. We are taking a neutral position on LR 22CA. Mainly because when we first read it, and when you see Green Amendment, we assume that you guys would like to attack cow farts. That's just what the group assumes. That being said, we wanted to take the time to address other environmental concerns that we have had that aligns with this, but nobody really wants to address. I'd really like to draw your attention to State Statute 2-3237, where Nebraska has allowed the NRDs to contract with other entities for weather modification. I think our group specifically would really like to see a ban on weather modification. In some states, they've gone as far as banning chemtrails. I don't need you guys to be so specific, but please take a look at that statute. If we're concerned about a clean and healthy environment, that might be a great place to look at. As we know, there are a number of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not contracts, but different methods are out there that we know they're putting heavy metals and chemicals into our air. It's raining down. The other thing I wanted to mention, because it was stated that we've talked a lot about nitrates. And I don't know if you guys know this, but in both Ceresco and in Columbus, the nitrate levels have gotten so high that the microbes have quit breaking down the uranium, and we now have uranium that's turning radioactive. So we recently had a farmer in Ceresco who tried to go and recycle some of his irrigation pipes, and they rejected it because it tested positive for radiation. So there's some validity here to this, and I can't say that, you know, if the government gets sued over things like that, I think you guys kind of deserve it, because people don't want these things. It's unhealthy, and people from both sides of the political spectrum have been asking you guys to take a look at these things. So that was what I had to say. We don't necessarily support this constitutional amendment because I think the language is vague, and while we can all agree we want a clean and healthy environment, I do think that it would be abused for the sakes of people who don't like the smell of cow manure.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions. I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony.
Absolutely, thank you all.
Anybody else in the neutral capacity today? Now we're going to go back to proponents. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I apologize in advance. My last name is hyphenated. Anthony Rogers Wright, ANTHONY, ROGERS -WRIGHT. I'm here representing myself as a concerned resident of Nebraska and North Omaha. My friends, the great James Baldwin once said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." There are many interpretations of this sage aphorism, but I take it to mean that only by facing issues head on can we collectively take the steps towards collective positive change. Whether you believe in the science of climate change or not is not really my concern. What concerns me is ensuring everything is done to confront the challenges preventing all Nebraskans from the right to pursue and enjoy the good life. And we must face these challenges head on with fervor and with the conviction of morality and righteousness. From Scottsbluff to Grand Island, the Sound Hills, and North and South Omaha, farmers and ranchers, our great indigenous nations, and those who reside in urban environments collectively agree that protection of our natural resources, our lakes, rivers, aquifers, and world-renowned family farms and the quality products that they produce is necessary to maintain a robust economy and allow the good life to extend to, as our indigenous friends instruct us, the next 7 generations. But the Environmental Rights Amendment you are considering today is more than a proclamation of environmental protection. It is also an affirmation of the idea of democracy itself. The proposal in front of you maintains an epochal idea, a social experiment which infers that the people of Nebraska are the second house of legislation, continuing the tradition of the great George Norris, the architect of this estimable body known as the unicameral. Senator Norris argued that the legislature is supposed to be close to the people as well as more responsive to the needs of the people. The intergenerational, multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition of testifiers you have heard and will hear from today are asking you to be more responsive to the needs of the people by providing us with the opportunity to decide if we want an amendment to the state constitution that enshrines the rights of all Nebraskans to clean air, clean water, a safe climate, and a healthful environment. Because while we all may have different stories that furnish and inform the lives we live as individuals, we have been fused together by a collective narrative of environmental protection, an inalienable, self-affirming right for, by, and with the people. There's nothing radical, elitist, or extraordinary about this amendment. When you think about it, the idea of equal access to clean water and clean air in a healthful environment is quite banal. I would argue that it would be more radical to deny the people the opportunity to make this decision as part of a larger process of democracy. It would be more radical to institute a culture of interdiction as it pertains to the 10th Amendment of our nation's Constitution that enshrines the rights of the states to define how to interpret and exercise those laws and issues not covered by our federal government. As someone integral in shepherding the passage of the Environmental Rights Amendment in New York State, where 70% of New Yorkers voted for it, I can assure you of two things in closing. One, it was not just voted for and passed by city slickers, Madison Avenue or coastal elites, nor Wall Street brokers. It was passed by farmers in Albany, Syracuse, and Plattsburgh who don't want poisonous pipelines traversing their property and reducing their property values and ability to farm.
Okay, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Right?
I would just say in closing, I would remind you of one of my favorite sayings by a Catholic thinker who said, "Justice without power is impotent, power without justice is tyranny." You have an opportunity to demonstrate your commitment to justice by placing the power in the hands of the people to pass or reject this amendment.
Okay,
Thank you so
let's see if
much.
we've got some questions. Any questions? I don't see any.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next proponent. Welcome.
Welcome. Just a moment. Good afternoon, Senator Brandt and members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Mia Perales, M-I-A-P-E-R-A-L-E-S, and today I am here in support of the Green Amendment bill. I am a sophomore environmental engineering student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and as an environmental engineering student, I can attest to the dire need for climate action in Nebraska. And I could continue to talk as an environmental engineering student. I can give you facts and statistics, but today I want to testify as a girl who was born and raised in South Omaha. South Omaha is a culturally rich community with a predominantly Latino population. We are known for our restaurants, artwork, and cultural festivities like the Cinco de Mayo Festival, which brings over $7.5 million annually in a single weekend to our local economy. We are an asset to Nebraska. I cherish my community, which is why I believe it is important to address one of the most noticeable characteristics of South Omaha. If you've ever been to South Omaha, as soon as you get off the freeway, you notice you're there from the smell. The smell originates from the meatpacking plant and slaughterhouse in the heart of my community. This smell generates from the improper or insufficient treatment of wastewater, which leads to foul smells as the water stagnates or breaks down. These industrial facilities have continuously contaminated our water and polluted our air. And this issue is not exclusive to South Omaha. In fact, pollution from the Tyson Slaughterhouse and Beef Processing Plant in Lexington, which is situated less than 2 miles from the Platte River and among 4 federally designed critical habitats, risk the conservation of whooping cranes, an already endangered species. Now, by no means does the Green Amendment wish to close any slaughterhouse or meatpacking plant facilities. It simply wants to put into effect the constitutional right to clean air, pure water, and a healthy environment. The meatpacking industry is a critical job source for many immigrants in Nebraska. In fact, my grandmother worked there for over 20 years to provide for her 7 children as a single mother. Meat production and packaging is essential to Nebraska's economy, and it should not be contaminating our waterways and polluting our air. The University of Nebraska Medical Center has found a direct linkage to increase pediatric cancer rates and asthma rates in communities near factory farms and packing plants. In closing, I would like to say that a Green Amendment would protect marginalized communities that continue to face the repercussions of highly polluting industrial facilities through adverse health effects and environmental degradation. My community is extremely important to me. It's where I grew up. It's where I grew up going to church, learning Psalms 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and the world and all who live in it. For he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. It is my belief that the earth is God's sacred creation. Therefore, we must care for his creation and protect it instead of letting polluters damage it beyond repair. So today, I urge you to support LR 22CA. Thank you, and I will take any questions you may have.
Okay, let's see.
I'll make a statement.
Oh, there you go. Senator Juarez.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm glad that you brought this documentation for me. And I encourage you to come to our town hall in April and to interact with you about these issues and see how we can get them resolved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Senator DK.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here today. Quick question. Living in South Omaha, how do you have a plan or thoughts on how the meatpacking community and the residents could live in harmony there and what can be done?
Yeah, I think right now it's kind of hard to assess the full extent of the pollution that comes from the meatpacking plant because they aren't required to kind of publish all of their pollution. They aren't even required to publish their carbon emissions. So it's hard to see the full extent, but if we compare it to other similar industries in Nebraska or in states similar, I think we should definitely be regulating them more. They are contaminating our water and our air. They have continuously failed EPA regulations, and there's probably more regulations out there failing. It's just hard to get a feel for how badly they are. So I think through something like a Green Amendment, we can assess the emissions that they are putting out and hopefully reduce those.
Do you feel that they are in compliance with EPA standards that are coming down from the federal government now?
They are in compliance, but it's hard to know if they are always in compliance because they have continuously failed. I did put some documentation in my testimony if you would like to further research it. I think it's really important that just because they have passed some things doesn't mean that they have passed everything. So this amendment would definitely help with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Klaus.
Yes, thank you, and I apologize for being late ahead as another committee hearing. So if you mentioned this, you do have a listing of all their violations from the EPA? Have you had that or seen that?
I do not have a full list on my testimony, just because I wanted to keep everything pretty concise. But if you look it up, it is all readily available on the EPA website.
Thank you.
Senator Rabel.
Thank you, Ms. Perales. Could you just read that part of your testimony where you address the meatpacking plants in Nebraska?
Yeah, I can reread it. Is there a specific part that you wanted me to read?
It's in your first page, last two sentences in the last paragraph. Additionally, meatpacking plants.
Yes.
Can you talk about the
Additionally, meatpacking plants in Nebraska have continuously failed EPA water and air regulation, and Tyson's 5 largest plants in Nebraska dumped more than 100 million pounds of pollutants into waterways between 2018 and 2022, accounting for a third of their nationwide total emissions. This research study was published by the Union of Concerned Scientists, which, if this were online, you could click on the link, but it is not. So this is readily available.
Okay, thank you. I just want to substantiate a lot of the things they're bringing to our attention. I know in the state of Nebraska, we have $2.3 billion of requests for water infrastructure projects all throughout the state of Nebraska. About a third of them deal with nitrate and phosphate contamination, runoff, etc. So that can be found on the Natural Resources Commission website on their 2024 water report. So there is a tremendous amount of validity to what you're saying, and there's a lot more information on their website about all the requests from villages and towns and counties and cities requesting for water infrastructure assistance to help them take care of some of these contamination issues.
Any other questions?
I want to make one more comment.
Okay, Senator Juarez.
I just wanted to say that, with the current environment that there is, the EPA website, who knows how long that will be at. Thank you.
Senator Klaus.
Just more of a question, you know, when you start quoting numbers, no, thank you, Senator Moran. Do you have any idea how many pounds of pollutants that from the Omaha combined sewer that gets dumped into the waterways? And I'm just in a comparison, because that's a huge issue.
I
Probably not.
personally would not be able to speak
Yeah.
on that.
No, I'm just saying, when I look at these numbers, I think, well, my mind goes, well, how much is Omaha dumping into the Missouri River from the combined sewer? It's not separated. And
I do
all
know
those
that just from what I've learned in my engineering classes, wastewater is treated pretty seriously from the sewer, and it goes through an extensive process to remove the contaminants before it is put back into the stream, which is not always found in the case from streams from meatpacking plants or slaughterhouses. So I think there is a different extent of what is getting put back into our waterways and what the contamination levels are.
Thank you.
Senator DeKay.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. Just a follow-up question. We're talking about where they can continuously failed EPA water and air regulations. Do you know what kind of penalties or sanctions were brought to them because of those failed regulations?
Usually it comes in the form of a fine, I believe. They have faced threats for closure if they do not meet those standards, though.
So did they pay a fine and just go along business as usual, or they try to
Usually,
rectify the problem they had?
yeah, usually they will have to rectify the problem. They will be sent, they'll given a short amount of time to fix the problem, and then someone from the EPA or whatever administration will come down and see if they have fixed the problem or if it is still at hand.
Thank you.
I guess I find it interesting that you referenced the Lexington IBP plant, seeing as I was an engineer on that plant when we built that in 1990. I can assure you that meatpacking plant has the same type of water treatment system that a city does. That water is then piped cleanly underneath the Platte River into a canal, and then all that clean water gets dumped into the Platte River. I would encourage you as a future engineer to tour these facilities. They have some very top people that work there. They do not ever want to be out of compliance because that's our nation's food supply. I don't know, have you ever had an opportunity to go into these packing plants and work with the engineering staffs there?
I have toured a packing plant before, not as through an engineering perspective, but just as a concerned citizen of South Omaha. But I am interested to learn more about all the engineering ins and outs of that.
You bet. All right, thank you. Okay, just for clarification, do we have any more opponents here? Or anyone in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, next proponent. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Lake Liao, Lakeeliao. I am a 19-year-old climate organizer originally from Michigan, a fellow Midwesterner here, and a current sophomore in college. And I'm the founder and executive director of the Capitol Hill Academy, a national youth-led movement organizing for the constitutional right to a livable climate at both the state and federal level, which includes members from here in Nebraska. I've been working with Senator Duncan on organizing and advocating for this amendment and was asked to come testify to support the senator and the youth climate movement here. Since I was 14, for the past half-decade, I've been alarmed by the climate crisis. The 2018 IPCC report alarmed the world by declaring that we only had until 2030 to reduce carbon emissions by 50% to avert the worst effects of this crisis. This is the defining political problem of my generation. And it's not just a scientific report. I grew up watching deadly wildfires, hurricanes, floods, and heat waves destroy my community and the communities across the country. We're the generation that will face the worst effects of this crisis, even though we played no part in creating it. Oil executives knew about this before I was even born. I'd like to give this committee some context on the legal history of these climate and environmental amendments based on my experience working in constitutional climate law. Last year, I worked at a law firm that works to secure these rights by filing lawsuits and exclusively representing youth plaintiffs in court. I saw the power of constitutional rights in landmark legal victories in Montana in 2023, held v. Montana, and Hawaii just last summer. In Montana, out of concern over pollution from the coal mining industry, a constitutional convention in 1972 added an environmental rights amendment to the state constitution, which guarantees, among other things, the right to a clean and healthful environment for all present and future generations. This became the basis for the landmark lawsuit held v. Montana, where a judge declared that the state's support for a climate crisis fueling fossil fuel-based energy system was unconstitutional. This led to the nullification of a previous statewide law that prohibited greenhouse gas considerations from statewide permitting decisions. Legal precedent shows that these amendments have teeth to achieve real change to climate and environmental policy that decarbonizes our society while building an economy that works for all. Hawaii and Montana's historic lawsuits are not symbolic or abstract wins. They have teeth. They are tangible demonstrations of the power of constitutional climate rights in building a better future. They show what's possible when young people step up and lead without asking for permission. They show what's possible also right here in Nebraska, if we have the courage to stand for our values and fight for it. As young people, we know it's our future on the line. It should be unconstitutional to sell out our future to line the pockets of billionaire oil executives. It should be unconstitutional to perpetuate cycles of environmental racism and economic exploitation of our most vulnerable communities for the comfort of a few. It should be unconstitutional to settle for a status quo that will cause mass suffering and the death of billions of people, including current youth and future generations.
Mr. Lau, your light has come on. Do you want to wrap up with a final thought here?
Yes, I'm literally on the last sentence, so perfect timing. And we're already at 1.5 C warming, the warning from 2018. A future for our generation should not be up for debate, and that's why we need this amendment right here in Nebraska. Thank you.
Let's see what we've got for questions.
Interesting. Good job.
I don't see anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next proponent.
Hello. My name is Nick Williams, NickWilliams. I'm a proponent. I think it's a baby step. I think it's a necessary step. I think it means accountability where there's responsibility. I think the assumption of that accountability is very important. Otherwise, things like Alt N occur again. There were 6 notifications to the state of the issue that was happening there. And the state responded with investigating, seeing that, yep, there was a problem, and nobody did anything because there was no accountability. There's a lot of other issues in the state with the same regard. If we don't lean towards assuming that accountability, then we're not actually trying to change anything. That's all I have.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions. I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony. Next proponent. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brandt and members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Ken Winston, K-E-N-W-I-N-S-T-O-N. I'm appearing on behalf of Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light. So Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light supports LR. I put LB22CA. I know that. LR22CA. And they're both spiritual and practical reasons for our support. And I note that Mia quoted Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and I wanted to repeat that. If we believe the earth is divinely created, it follows that we have an obligation to care for it. I also wanted to tell a couple of Bible stories well, these are kind of the stories that you heard back when you were in Sunday school as a kid. But one of the stories that I always found really inspirational was the story of the young shepherd boy David taking on the giant Goliath. And and the fact that you have this young person who stands up and he uses a new technology. He uses a slingshot, and he defeats the supposedly undefeatable giant. I mean, Goliath was supposed to be invincible, but he beats him because he has courage and because he's willing to try something new. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm encouraging the committee to listen to the voices of the young people here, that they're coming forth, they've got some new ideas, they're showing courage and vision. And so that's one story I'd like to share with you. The other story that I was thinking about is the story of Joseph, also an Old Testament story, because he had visionary dreams when he was a teenager, and his brothers got mad at him for that. And so they threw him in a pit and sold him off into slavery. But it turned out that he rose to a position of power because he was able to correctly predict the 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And so I think there's a message here about the wisdom of young people. I guess I'm encouraging the committee to recognize that. And I also have a list of practical reasons why we support it. I guess one that I want to particularly mention is the Ogallala Aquifer, because that's a resource that we have that no other state has, and this would be an ability to protect that. And one other thing I wanted to mention, there was a question about the Alt-N situation. Alt-N violated NDE rules for years before anyone took any action against them. And there were letters that were sent to them saying, stop doing that, that's bad, don't do that anymore, and they kept doing it, and they kept getting worse. Something like a Green Amendment would enable us to take action there. I guess the other thing I also wanted to mention is the Green Amendment also provides some opportunities. It can incentivize things like renewable energy and making sure that we have healthy soils in our state, things of that nature. So,
Mr. Winston, your red light is on. Do you
Okay.
want to wrap up?
yeah, and anyway, well, with that, I'd like to encourage the committee to advance LR22CA.
All
Thank you,
right,
Senator.
let's see if we've got questions. I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Next, proponent. Proponent. Welcome.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Chairman Brandt and the members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Jackie Petro. That's JACKIPETROW. I'm here to testify in support of LB 22CA for myself and also on behalf of Sustain UNL. Sustain UNL is a recognized student organization at UNL which works to promote sustainability in our schools and communities. We support this constitutional amendment because it will help protect our futures in Nebraska. In 2022, the United Nations passed a resolution declaring an inherent right to a clean environment. This helps solidify an international framework for what is, quite simply, a human right. Today, we're asking for what essentially is implementation of this at the state level. As college students, we want to settle somewhere where we don't have to worry about medical issues from avoidable pollution. We want to be healthy. We want our siblings, our nieces and nephews, and our future children to be healthy. With this amendment, Nebraska can do better. On an individual level, I've lived in Nebraska my whole life and have always enjoyed spending time in our natural spaces. I grew up in Bellevue and am now attending the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, where I live in Senator Conrad's district. I love this state and I'm worried about the impacts of climate change on our people. When I was in middle school in Bellevue, we were hit with really destructive flooding, which destroyed homes, parks, and parts of Offutt Air Force Base. This led to the temporary movement of STRATCOM, which is a movement of control over our country's nuclear weapons, which really scared me. So clearly climate change poses a threat to our national security, since this event was likely exacerbated by climate change, and natural disasters like it are only likely to get worse. This is just one reason why this bill is so pertinent. Mitigating the climate crisis, which this amendment would allow us to do with more ease, is key to our futures and our country's future. I would love to remind us all of the adage that Mr. Argenbright brought up earlier in this hearing. We're borrowing this land from our grandchildren. This is how we protect our land for our grandchildren. Thank you for your time today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let's see what we've got. I see none. Wait, excuse me, Senator Rabel.
I enjoyed your testimony, Ms. Petroff. Can you tell us what are you studying at UNL?
Yeah, so I'm studying environmental studies and also political science.
Okay, great, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Good job, thank you.
Yep. Next proponent.
Good afternoon, thanks for this opportunity. By the way, I only had 10 copies, so I'll give this an extra one, sorry about that. My name is Dr. David Corbin, D-A-V-I-D-C-O-R-B-I-N. I'm a professor emeritus in health education and public health after teaching there for 31 years. I've been the president of the Public Health Association of Nebraska, and for several years I was the Nebraska representative to the Governing Council of the American Public Health Association. It's the oldest and largest public health association in the United States. Obviously, I'm here to support LR 22CA, the Green Amendment. Environmental health centers on relationships between people and their environment. When people are exposed to hazards like polluted air and lead and nitrates in their drinking water, they can develop serious health conditions such as asthma, heart disease, cancer, and even dementia. The Nebraska Green Amendment will strengthen healthy economic growth that comes from environmental protection and will help state and local governments to avoid costly impacts of environmental harm, including illness and healthcare costs, emergency response services, and cleanup costs associated with flooding, wildfires, and drought. The Green Amendment will ensure that government actions avoid environmental degradation rather than responding to it after the fact. Just this morning in the World Herald, there was an article about my next paragraph, which is the $307 million One Red Comprehensive Action Plan, which seeks short-term and long-term greenhouse gas reduction measures across all sectors. For a while, we thought that money was going to be drawn back. According to the article today, we have that $307 million, which will go for just the kind of things that we're talking about here today. This plan will propose voluntary measures. This is from their own website. Voluntary measures and financial incentives that could produce environmental and economic benefits across Nebraska. The plan will assess potential benefits of these measures statewide and for low-income and underserved communities, which include both rural and urban areas. Governor Pillen said about the grant, the widespread output received across Nebraska was instrumental to the success of this highly competitive grant application process. We are grateful for the investment in our state's agriculture and energy projects that will make an incredible impact now and in future generations. Both Omaha and Lincoln have plans to improve so they could piggyback off of this amendment. And I have something about Alt N, but we've already talked about that, so I will leave that. And I will just say that my second page, which was my closing, is not there. So I can assure you that it was very compelling and very moving.
All right. Let's see if there's any questions. Senator Raybold has a question.
Thank you, Dr. Corbin. Could you tell us a little bit your thoughts on Alt N and the conditions in Meade?
Yes, as was referred to earlier, Alt N was violating the law for many, many, many years. At first, nobody even knew that they were doing it, and then when they found out, there was a thing called coach to compliance. Don't do that, and then they'd say don't do it, and they kept doing it. And so they kept doing it, and I live in Douglas County, so right now, that waste with all those insecticides, which is in this last paragraph here, is going to the landfill in Douglas County. Claims not to be hazardous, but when they take it there, they protect the tires of the trucks, they wear masks, they put all this stuff in there, and then they take it to that and they dump it. And so there's a lot of us who think that that's hazardous. If it's hazardous on this end, why isn't it hazardous on the other end? So there's many things that we've been working on for Alt-N for a long time. And I did quote Governor Ricketts, who added Alt-N is a company that's terribly managed. And it was terribly managed, but not much was done about it until it was first revealed by The Guardian, a British newspaper. That's where the revelation came.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, Senator Raybold again.
Just to follow up, Dr. Corbett, are they doing testing on the dumping, or the grounds where they're dumping the waste?
But I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, are they doing testing in Douglas
No.
County on where they've dumped
No,
the
we're trying to
waste?
get permission to do that, and, also UNL has done things, and they found neonicotinoids, the insecticides in the home. They only looked at 11 homes in Meade, and they all had neonicotinoids inside their house, and most of them had it outside the house, and they compared that to other areas not near there, and they did not have it. So there's a lot of things we don't know. The legislature fortunately allowed $1 million a couple of years ago to do the study for UNMC and Creighton, and that's how we found out some of the things. Not just what it does to humans, but what it does to bees and other animals and plants.
Okay, thank you.
Senator DeKay?
Thank you. In the highlighted paragraph number 4, about halfway down, it says this plan will propose voluntary measures. How are those voluntary measures carried out, and what's being done on that front of them?
You have to talk to NDEE about that. Those are their words. And so basically, I think what they're trying to say is they're not going to make you do something, but they will offer incentives to do things that they think will help.
So with the other part of that statement, on a voluntary basis, it's probably not working out very well unless there's a financial gain from them to do that.
Yes, I mean, that's what their plan says. And so a lot of that is for agricultural, a large percent of that $307 million. And that's what the governor speaks so highly of. And the fact that they got $307 million is a testament to the fact that, it's going to be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Klaus?
Thank you, Senator Brandt. When you talked briefly about hauling off the landfills, do you know if they were going to landfills that had cells, so it was protected?
Well, all landfills, they cover it up each day. But and they're all lined.
Right.
But so were the lagoons at all the end, and those lagoons had formed what was called whales. So they came up from the bottom, the gas was coming up, and they were compromised, and they leaked. We don't know that will happen at the landfill, but we don't know that it doesn't. So it would be nice to know those materials and if they took any special precautions.
Yeah, thank you. I was talking to someone that runs a landfill yesterday. In fact, they were talking about the dumping fees and the increased costs on landfills. And they were saying sometimes when you get that hazardous waste, they need to make sure it gets in where it's lined, because to your point, if they have to set it outside, you're not gaining anything. So that's why I was asking if you knew at least the cells that are lined offer some protection.
Yeah, and I know they're writing grants to try to improve the kind of things that go in the landfill, but you may remember when there was a Keystone pipeline leak in Kansas, that waste came to Douglas County too, and I don't think that was appropriate.
Well, I live upstream, so I'm good.
All right, any other questions? I don't see any more questions. Thank you. Next proponent.
Thank you, Derek.
Welcome.
Welcome. Shirley Niemeyer, SHIRLEYNIEMEYER. Honorable Senators, I support LR 22CA. Why? And I know many of you already know this, but I want to summarize some of the things that are happening with our climate. Thousands and thousands of scientists throughout the world report devastation of climate change happening now. The climate tipping point risk can occur within 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade. That's the climate range, according to scientists. And the world is heading well beyond this range at more than 2.5 in the future. Scientists have warned about the potentially devastating and irreversible breakdown of the Gulf Stream. The ocean current global experts indicate a serious risk of major ocean circulation change in the Atlantic in the decades to come. I've cited all this with my citations if you want to check some of them, and you go to other sources as well. Recent studies link nitrate to a variety of diseases, birth defects, pregnancy complications, and various cancers. Nebraska has the highest pediatric cancer rate west of Pennsylvania. Nebraska has the 7th highest pediatric cancer rate in the U.S. And they did a study. Nebraska counties with slightly elevated nitrate levels showed a 7-fold increase in the leukemia rate from compared to counties with minimal nitrate levels, the research shows. These counties had lymphoma rates 4 times higher than counties with low levels, and that's from UNMC. Extreme heat events likely will kill more and kills more people than any other event disaster. Nebraska had a record $2 billion in damage from just one storm, the bomb cyclone storm combined with blizzard rain and widespread flooding and massive destruction. Nebraska could be an energy producing state. Nebraska, and these figures vary. Nebraska is in the top 5% for wind resources and the top 10% in solar resources, and that depends on whether they're talking about the amount, the wind, it varies. Nebraska, as of now, does not have a climate action plan, but is working on one, I believe, and it's supposed to be August of this year, I think. The next topic is the disappearance of nature. Scientists are sounding the alarm about a catastrophic extinction crisis that threatens the biodiversity of our planet. And this is from the source there. The U.S. approximately 12,000 wildlife species need conservation assistance to avoid extinction. The disappearance of bees and other pollinators is reducing crop yields and threatens food security. There are 3 billion fewer birds in North America than there were 50 years ago. Okay, and I do hope that you'll read the rest of the bullet points. I really do. And yeah, figures vary a little bit, but I tried to read a variety of research reports and systems. So, and
Let's see if we have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Senator Rabel.
Ms. Niemeyer, I want to thank you very much for all the facts and statistics. I'm going to help you summarize it in 10 words about climate change. It's real, it's us, it's bad, scientists agree, there's hope. So thank you, but the facts are great.
Okay, any other questions? Senator DeKay.
Thank you. You talked about Nebraska could be a top energy producing state. And we talked a little bit about wind and other resources on the renewable side. What's your thoughts on nuclear generation in comparison with carbon-free emissions?
I think there's been some research being done, and there are some movement toward doing small underground nuclear operation systems for communities, not the big ones like we've seen. Because of all the problems we've seen in the past, people are scared of it. But I think we need to address that issue and see, perhaps in Nebraska, trials. I thought Berkshire Hathaway invested in some trials in the U.S. or another part of the world. So I would like to see that explored. We're going to need many more options for energy. If we reduce oil and coal, we're going to need wind and solar and cellular from unique species, and we're going to need nuclear and wave action. We're going to need a broad spectrum of sources so that we can reduce the amount of not only carbon dioxide, but also we need to reduce methane. And methane can be a source of energy too, but you have to weigh the outcome of what comes out from using it.
As a source of baseload generation, do you think nuclear could answer those questions?
I'm sorry, I have a hearing problem.
Okay, as a source of baseload generation, do you think nuclear could be an answer to some of those problems?
I don't think it can be the only answer. I don't think it can be the biggest. I think it's going to have to be a variety. That's just my personal thought. I'm not an engineer and haven't studied in depth, but right now we do have some basis. But some of the other countries are well ahead of us in terms. China is moving way ahead with a lot of solar, and we should be leading. We should be leading.
But China's also way ahead of us on coal generation too.
Yeah, and maybe that's why they're trying to push their solar more.
Just for reference, with nuclear SMRs, we talked about that a little bit, are going to be coming into production in the very near future, if you call within the next 6 to 10 years.
Good.
And there's other aspects where we can take nuclear waste in the spent rods and repurpose them and produce hydrogen out of that. And there's prototype studies taking place in Nebraska as we speak now. So,
Wonderful.
so anyway,
Thank you. And I just want to say, and I didn't want the students to hear what I had to say, but there's hope. I really believe that, but you have to let loose with the research and the technology, and it's going to take a lot of people across the world to solve this problem, but we've got to move fast. But I'm really happy that you told me that, and thank you for knowing that.
Okay, Senator Klaus has a question.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Good information, thank you for providing this. As I was reading through it, and we just talked, packing plants are fairly localized, even though when it gets in the water, it moves. Mead was fairly local, but nitrates, they're all across the state. I mean, that is an issue all across the state, so the information, I think, is true. So thank you for providing that.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Next proponent. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Aubrey Bruck, A-U-B-R-E-Y, B-R-U-C-K, and I am present today in support of LR22CA. I am a high school senior in Blair, Nebraska, and I'm also a founding member of New Voices. While growing up in Blair, a town of approximately 8,000 people, I had a pretty typical childhood playing in my backyard and in creeks. Our clothes would be covered in grass stains, and we came home caked in mud up to our knees. However, while I do look back fondly of my childhood, it does ring some alarms. Our creeks were often full of glass and rusty metal, and the waters polluted with oils, pesticides, and heavy metals from highway and lawn runoff. To look back on these memories of splashing in and sometimes even drinking this water as sirens going off in my head. Even this being said, my childhood experience in my suburban wilderness crafted who I am. I am now a passionate conservationist and spend much of my time researching current events and volunteering at our local wildlife refuges. DeSoto and Boyer Chute National Wildlife Refuges, located just outside of Blair, are my secondary homes. At these refuges, questions are no longer answered with made-up facts by my third-grade buddies. The magic held in the creeks is alive there too, and I've seen through my 121 hours that I've clocked there that it has not weakened, but grown stronger. Because these issues are worsening, and not just in my hometown. I have a lot of stuff in here about nitrates, but I'm sure you all know about that already. Nitrate contamination is expected to worsen, especially for those in rural communities. And pollution is heavy in Nebraska, especially non-point source pollutants. Pollution like this keeps the state's children inside, where they will no longer have their eyes open to the wonders of the Nebraskan outdoors. It's sad to admit it, but I no longer hear yelling and laughter from the creeks. What once were magic forests run void of childhood wonder. This is why I urge you to vote for this bill, so that all children of Nebraska, young and old, can continue to live here and have the good life. Thank you for your time.
All right, let's see if we have any questions. I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next proponent. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Brandt and members of the Natural Resource Committee. My name is Sarah Holler, S-A-R-A-H-O-L-L-E-R. And I'm here today as a young person who cares deeply about the future of this state and the country, and the role we can play in protecting our environment for generations to come. I strongly support the Nebraska Green Amendment because it affirms the fundamental right of every person, especially young people and our future generations, to clean air, safe water, and a healthy environment. The question before us now is, how effective can our government be when the natural environment that sustains it is falling apart right before our eyes, destroying the lives of the people that the Constitution claims to protect? As I grew up, I watched farms in my community slowly lose their functional capacity, my friends' families lose their livelihoods, and the produce stands on the side of the road where my family frequented to buy produce become few and far between. As young people, we are inheriting a world shaped by the policies you enact today. The consequences of environmental degradation, rising temperatures, extreme weather, pollution, are threats to our water supply are not abstract issues to us. They are lived realities that affect our communities, our health, and our future opportunities. Without strong constitutional protections, our right to a livable environment remains vulnerable to political shifts and corporate interests that prioritize short-term profits over long-term, life-sustaining policy. This amendment ensures that the state government continues and considers environmental impacts before damage is done, rather than responding to harm after it has already occurred. By passing the Nebraska Green Amendment, you are making a promise to young people that our right to a clean and healthy environment is not negotiable. I urge you to stand with us, the people, and support this amendment. Our future depends on it. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we have questions. Senator Klaus.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. You mentioned, and I had mentioned Senator Duncan this, so that first part where it says including pure water, you said clean water. So you would be okay if that was wording that would be changed in that?
No, I think that pure water is I feel that, as was mentioned before by multiple of the other testifiers, that the broad language does not necessarily have specific nailed down definitions, and that pure water is what was chosen in this case, but I know that in other states the language slightly varies, but the principle still stands, and the litigation that can come from that will be equivalent, and the values that it will instill in both Nebraska and its potential to inspire future environmental movements across the country will be equivalent.
That's a good answer. I was thinking that clean water is a good definition to me, because pure water is, that is very specific and narrow, but you did good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next proponent. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's having a nice day. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm Sophia Hayes.
You might have to lean into the mic a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Or talk a little louder. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. I am Sophia Hayes, spelled S-O-F-I-A, Hayes, H-A-Y-E-S. I am from Kearney, Nebraska, the district of Senator Stan Klaus. I'm an environmental and sustainability studies major at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. I'm here today to speak in support of LR22CA. I grew up on the outskirts of the town of Kearney, walking around with my friends in the cornfields surrounding my neighborhood and running through the sprinklers, as well as riding my bike to my friends' houses. It was a pretty typical upbringing, and thankfully I was spared of any grave health issues, but the drinking water used by my neighborhood likely had dangerously high levels of nitrates. Our tap water, coming from a well right under the middle of what has recently been predicted to have nitrate levels of over 10 parts per million. I am close to multiple people that have been diagnosed with cancer, and I am very frightened by how prevalent these health risks are in my community. The University of Nebraska Medical Center has found that Nebraska watersheds with high nitrate levels have shown correlations to high occurrences of pediatric brain cancer, leukemia, lymphoma, as well as all other health issues. This major socio-ecological issue is having consequences on the environment and the health of almost 2 million inhabitants in the state who rely primarily on groundwater for daily necessities. Although I can't prove a direct cause to the nitrate pollution in the water to these diseases, it seems very likely that these issues have been caused by this contamination. I'm very afraid for the many different health impacts this poison is having on my community. Throughout my life, nature has been a very integral part of my existence. I grew up primarily outside, bouncing around different parks, fishing with my family, and visiting the farms of family friends in the area, as well as walking around the Audubon Nature Sanctuary south of Gibbon. Having the opportunity to experience the wildlife and this great sandhill crane migration in these areas has been incredible throughout my life, but there has been a decline in the wildlife population since I was a child. This decline in wildlife can be traced back to excessive pollution, which this amendment could improve. I want to protect this wildlife and the natural spaces in an effort to carry on the legacy of our beautiful Nebraska landscape that greatly benefits the economy of our state. I would like to have the option to stay in the state of Nebraska and raise a family here, but the thought of exposing my future children to the effects of nitrate-infested water sickens me. Clean air, a stable climate, healthy ecosystems and environments, and therefore clean water are basic human rights, and I believe that the state constitution should reflect that. Thank you very much for your time, and I believe that if we all work together, we can create an equitable and clean environment for the future of Nebraska with significantly less childhood cancer.
Okay, let's see if we have questions. Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Yep. Next proponent. Any more proponents?
Good afternoon, Senator Brandt, members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Al Davis, A-L-D-A-V-I-S. First of all, I just want to say how impressed I am with the testimony that's been delivered here today by the young students who are actively interested in this bill, and I hope for the best here. So we are, with the Nebraska chapter of the Sierra Club and its 3,000 members, we are really pleased to support LR22CA and want to thank Senator Duncan for introducing this important piece of legislation. I also want to show my appreciation today to the many young Americans who have taken on the environmental mantle and are focused on concrete solutions to the issues associated with the burning of fossil fuels. Nebraska is a unique state and is often overlooked as one of the nation's most beautiful states. While the state is not home to dramatic vistas, the Sandhills offers a quiet beauty, and the Butte country in the Panhandle is spectacular. But it is what lies under the ground what sets Nebraska apart from neighboring states. The economy of the state has been amplified significantly during the past 70 years by mining the water in the aquifer to produce crops on our loamy soils. The state leads the nation in irrigated acres, which produces countless tons of soybeans, corn, and other crops. Nebraska is also the epicenter of the livestock feeding industry. Unlike our neighbors to the south, Nebraska has managed its water resources by recognizing that mining the water without focusing on depletion will eventually produce a ruined ag economy as the aquifer dries up. The citizens should be forever grateful to those who offered solutions decades ago which have protected the aquifer in most of the state from depletion. The goals of LR22 are not unlike the goals of the senators who had the vision to sculpt policies which use water, but with an eye to perpetual recharge. That does not mean that all our problems are solved. The state's aquifer is contaminated with too much nitrogen, which is hazardous to human health. Other parts of the aquifer are contaminated with pesticides, uranium, benzene, and other chemicals. The young Nebraskans here today face a climate which will be hotter, drier, and more unstable. Global warming is not a myth, but a fact, and truly an inconvenient truth as it was labeled decades ago. As elders of the planet, it is our duty to offer solutions rather than shrug our shoulders. Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican and the 26th U.S. president, was the nation's leading conservationist in his day. President Roosevelt said this about the environmental movement: "There can be no greater issue than that of conservation in this country. Conservation is a great moral issue, for it involves the patriotic duty of ensuring the safety and continuance of the nation. I do not intend that our natural resources shall be exploited by the few against the interests of the many, nor do I intend to turn them over to any man who will wastefully use them by destruction and leave it to those who come after as a heritage damaged by just so much. The rights of the public to the natural resources outweigh private rights and must be given its first consideration. Roosevelt's message is timeless and important, and the world's population faces the possibility of what seems like unlimited resources are in fact running out. Nebraskans must join other states like Montana in adopting initiatives like the Green Amendment to protect not only our livelihood, but the livelihood of the creatures who have come to rely on us to provide for their needs and also for the generations to come. Again, thanks to Senator Duncan for introducing the bill. We look forward to working with him and this committee.
Questions? Any questions? I don't see any, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next proponent. Any more proponents? Okay, come on up. Yeah, do you? Did you want to testify?
Yes.
Okay, then
Yes.
just hand the sheet to the, yes. If you just want to be counted, if you don't want to testify and be counted, please fill out the yellow sheets. Yeah. So, otherwise, we're good to go. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, committee. My name is James Reed Olson, James, middle name Reed, last name Olson. I go by my middle name Reed, so that's why I'm giving that to you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, committee. I wrote these up, but I submitted them a little bit late, so I just hand wrote some of my comments, and I have a cold, I'm sorry. I want to comment about, obviously you've pointed out the unhealthy and dangerous levels of nitrate in drinking water of many rural Nebraskans, including children that are impacted. That's very obvious. Whenever you visit any, we travel to northeast Nebraska once a month, and we don't drink their water because they have high nitrate levels. That's very concerning. Obviously, that's been pointed out here at length. It's not acceptable, and it should not be tolerated. When I hear that this has happened for 3 decades, I've lived in Nebraska about 5 years, and I didn't realize that this was an issue for 3 decades. It's really unbelievable that this is happening. When you hear 7 times the level of leukemia and cancers, that's alarming when you've encountered that in your family. This can all be resolved by correcting and complying with EPA and Nebraska regulations. I don't know, apparently these cases, and they've been cited, communities have been cited multiple times, and this hasn't happened. The Alton situation was disastrous and unbelievable that this happened. If for no other reason, we should also embrace sustainable energy such as wind. Nebraska should be the number two in this country for wind power. Absolutely no reason they can't reach that. We're in the top 3 to 5 nationally in wind power, high winds. Why not use this terrible wind that we have? Why don't we use it to our benefit? We could make 150 million, 200 million, maybe $300 million could be applied towards property taxes in this state by building wind turbines, as well as there's huge potential in solar in the state as well. Just because you don't want to see it out in your backyard or in your 500 acres, that does not seem to be a reasonable solution. There's a lot of economic benefits, and we can really gain by using renewable energy and in this state.
Okay, Mr. Olson, your time is up. Let's see if we have any questions. Senator Klaus.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Brand. I just have one that's kind of off the wall a little bit, but yet we're going to be facing this and revenue and all those things. When you talk about bottled water and we talk about, some of these are going to come with a price tag. What's your thoughts on taxing bottled water to generate revenue? Just, I'm not picking on you, I'm just saying, think about that a little bit, because we got to fund some of these things somehow. And presently, we don't do bottled water.
I don't understand why you'd tax bottled water when in a lot of cases when we travel to Cumming County, we buy bottled water. If we buy it, we take our water with us. We buy bottled water because the drinking water has high nitrate levels. And I know that's a big concern for children, but we're cautious as well. I think taxation, there should be taxes on plastic bags. That could be a way to gain quite millions of dollars. Plastic bags, 500 million plastic bags are used by Nebraskans annually. I estimate that. I say I would use probably 500 bags a year. So taxing things like that, the use of plastic, that makes much more sense.
Okay. Well, be careful what you ask for.
No, I would gladly pay. I'd gladly pay.
Yeah. No, thank you. I just was kind of trying to get.
Yeah. No, that's the problem. What if the water is unsafe?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any more questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next proponent. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Senators. I am Sarah Shu, first name S-A-R-A-H, last name S-H-U. I am a junior at Elkhorn South High School, and I am here on behalf of the Students of Action and Representation, which I am the founder and president of. And I just want to thank you all today for inspiring me with this testimony, and I want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to share my voice for representation of those who can't be heard. So many of the opponents from earlier today have highlighted the impact of this amendment and what it could do to businesses. But I want to rather highlight that it's not about the health of the businesses, but it's about the health of the people. We're not asking to just sue companies for no reason or plummet our economy. No. We are asking to protect our livelihood and our future. We aren't here to put an end to industries, but rather we are here to promote our own futures and our health. We are here to ask for the benefit of the citizens and not for a future of scarcity or illness. It's not about prioritizing the industries over the people. And even in this situation, there are still benefits for these industries and these businesses where better regulations under the Green Amendment could provide higher quality production and more profit for these businesses, which is another perspective that we should open our eyes to. On top of that, though, this amendment also gives us the ability to hold these groups accountable, and we can use this to put an end to systematic poverty and environmental racism. We can see this in various communities where sewage dumping and waste dumping is substantially higher in communities of low income and majority communities. And we see this with also the benefits that this provides, for example, with the previously mentioned One Red incentives, where it has a total worth of $307 million, which is well worth it for the purpose of reducing 160 million metric tons of greenhouse gases. This is far more efficient than waiting 20 years into the future, where we have to funnel billions more of dollars into reducing the damage that we've already done. And simply, this is because in 30 to 40 years, money won't be able to buy back the bounty of our land and the health of our people. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we've got some questions. Senator DeKay.
Thank you. When you talked about the dumpage of sewage and waste products in neighborhoods of lower income, could you provide me some of the data on that?
Well, actually, this was a testimony that I had, or that I formed over the course of just watching the other testifiers throughout this session, so it's a bit of an impromptu. However, we do see this, and we see this on statistics. You can look at multiple pages on the Environmental Protection Agency. We can see this exemplified by previous speakers talking about, for example, in South Omaha, which is a majority Latino community. We see this with the meat packing industry there, where there's less regulations, where the sewage dumping is significantly higher. We don't see these complaints in areas like Elkhorn in West Omaha, and this is specifically because it's not a coincidence. And it's not just in Nebraska, it's all throughout our nation. We see these patterns. It's not something that I can provide statistics on when it's in front of you. And it's something that needs to be addressed, because this has been something that's been burdening our society for centuries.
I appreciate your passion, so.
That's what I'm here for.
And rest assured, we are, all of us here in the legislature are looking at how we can clean our environment and clean up problems, but we still work within the DEQ and EPA standards too, so thank you.
And that's exactly why the Green Amendment helps hold those people accountable, right?
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next proponent.
Thank you, Senators.
Yep. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Edison McDonald, EDISON, MCDONALD, on behalf of GC Resolve. GC Resolve is a company that works with family farmers transitioning to regenerative agriculture. I'll keep my statement very short today. I'm just so excited about all the young people who have shared amazing stories here today. We're here in support of those young voices in LR 22CA. This amendment is crucial not only for safeguarding our natural resources, but it's a vital step forward in helping to support regenerative farmers across the state who are stewards of the land. This amendment offers many benefits to regenerative agriculture businesses, which is a focus on a holistic land management practice that leverage the power within the carbon cycle to build up in soil health, crop resilience, and nutrient density to help make sure that we can produce crops and help be good stewards of the land. We believe this amendment will help to put us in better alignment with the new Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA, goals of advancing regenerative agriculture, tackling the disease epidemic, eliminating environmental toxins, and protecting natural habitats. In particular, we're excited about this bill focusing on elements that will help to ensure we have healthy soils and increase biodiversity. The amendment's call for healthy soils aligns with the practices of regenerative farming. We're also excited about the focus on water conservation and quality, because those regenerative farming practices require having quality water to go along with our quality soil. And then lastly, the economic viability and sustainability, making sure that we're supporting these businesses who want to be able to continue to grow, requires having a healthy environment. With that, I'll close. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we have questions.
One quick.
Senator DeKay.
Thank you. You mentioned Make America Healthy Again. Do you think RFK Jr. is going to implement any programs that's going to be on the federal level that's going to be beneficial to on the statewide level?
You know, as I said, just out of those platform pieces, you know, we've been excited to hear him talking about within the platform of supporting regenerative agriculture, tackling the disease epidemic, eliminating environmental toxins, and protecting natural habitats. We're still waiting to hear and see more specific details as to how that looks, but those statements of position are what we have now.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? I don't see anything, thank you. Next proponent. Anybody else to testify for the bill? Anyone opposed to the bill? Anyone to speak in the neutral capacity? Senator, it's time to close. And we had online 138 proponents, 9 opponents, 1 neutral, and no ADA comments. Senator Dungan.
Thank you, Chair Brandt and other members of the Natural Resources Committee. I don't want to take too much time. I know it's been a long day, but I do want to touch on a couple of things. So when I first introed this bill, I said that I was proud to introduce to you LR 22CA, and I mean that. I really do feel a sense of pride in this bill. The pride, though, is not in the work that I've done, but it's getting to be a part of the amazing work that you've seen here today. I'm not trying to be cheesy when I say that I'm legitimately blown away by the works that I've seen the youth here do. And I think many of you know the testifiers that testify before us on a regular basis can't answer the questions that we ask them, but I think every question you asked was answered amazingly well. So I just want to be very clear of how appreciative I am for the testifiers, as well as the other people that didn't testify here today, but are here to show their support. Clearly, there's a number of folks who would love to get up and tell you exactly why this is important to them, but I understand that there's some interest in trying to make sure that we can all get out of here on time. So I would encourage you to go read the comments that are online. A number of folks who weren't able to testify today submitted really good letters and really good comments that talk not just about the policy implications, but the personal stories of why this is important. So I would really encourage you to check those out. Just to touch on a couple of points that were brought up, I understand that some of the opposition here today, as well as some of the opposition online, is about frivolous lawsuits. As an attorney, I completely understand that. Nobody wants to see our court systems clogged up. I would just tell you that in my research and in talking with folks who've been doing this a lot longer than me, no lawsuit that has been brought in any of the states that have amendments such as this has ever been dismissed as frivolous. And so I just want to be very clear. I don't believe that there's going to be some influx of litigation. I certainly don't think Nebraskans are inherently more litigious than any other state. And so I just want to sort of quell any concerns that you might have about that. To Senator Klaus's point about some of the language in there, happy to have a conversation about that. What's included in this amendment is what I would consider sort of the gold standard. It's taking a lot of the concerns or questions that have been raised in other litigation from other states and trying to answer it ahead of time. So that way the court doesn't have to say, does it apply to this, does it apply to that? But if there's particulars in the language that you think would be clearer, and to your point, provide a broader definition as opposed to a more narrow definition when it comes to that pure water, for example, happy to talk about that and see if there's any changes we can make. Finally, there were some concerns brought up about the interplay between this as well as the EPA and other standing Nebraska laws as they pertain to the environment. These kind of amendments, for lack of a better way to put it, act as a stopgap. Certainly the EPA would still apply. Certainly we would still have Nebraska state regulations pertaining to the environment. And I would expect those to continue to evolve over time as we look into new sources of energy like nuclear. And I would hope that our laws keep up with that. In the meantime, what this does is it ensures that the state of Nebraska has that trustee duty to really care for this land, both for us and for future generations, to make sure that we're making responsible decisions and to make sure that we are not acting in ways that can harm the environment moving forward. So I see these as complementary with the laws that currently exist, not in contradiction with them. I would just close by saying I understand whenever a new amendment is brought at the federal level or the state level, it's often met with skepticism. It's met with concern, and it should be. I think whenever we change the Constitution, that's a big deal. I do believe, though, that looking across the country and looking at states that have implemented this, we see that this works, and we see that this is important. So with that, happy to answer any additional questions or continue to have conversations with the committee moving forward.
Let's see what we've got. Questions? Senator Conrad. All right.
Chairman Grant. Thank you, Senator. Good to have opportunity to hear more about this constitutional amendment for potential referral that you've brought forward. One thing, two threads that I want to learn more about, and see if you could share some additional thinking with the committee. So a lot of times when maybe we first see an issue like this presented, and it might be regarding taxation, the epic work that's been out there, it might be minimum wage policy that starts in the legislature and then due to inaction ends up at a vote of the people through citizen initiative. It might be vouchers. It ends up in referendum. If this measure does not move forward in some format this biennium, is this part of a broader effort to seed a potential ballot initiative? And you may not know that, but it seems to me like it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer, to put it shortly, yes, right? I think that absolutely, if we fail to act, this is the kind of thing that will end up being the subject of a ballot initiative. And as we've seen here, there's a lot of excitement about that. And I think that if it were to go that path, certainly there would be a lot of support for that. And so I think what we're doing here is A, starting the conversation to make sure we can start talking about what this looks like, but B, this also provides the legislature an opportunity to have input and to say that we as senators can help craft what this may or may not look like. And then obviously, as we all know, if this passes the legislature with 30 votes, it goes to a vote of the people. And so the public would then get to decide whether this is what they wanted or not. And so I see this as the beginning of a process, but it allows us to have that input as legislators.
Okay, thank you for your candor in that regard. It seems to me like it might be part of a broader effort there, and based on what I'm seeing and learning about on similar strategies and issues in other states. The last thread, and it's probably going to be beyond a simple give and take here in the closing on this measure at the public hearing, but you know, I had an opportunity to just kind of go back and quickly flip through the Nebraska Constitution because I wanted to just kind of refresh my recollection. There's numerous provisions of the Nebraska Constitution that have similar concepts in relation to strong language about how water is a necessity, for water dedicated for public purpose, hunting, fishing, conservation, recreation rights, a prohibition against alienation of natural resources, the Statement of Rights, which, you know, arguably touches upon many of these same issues and themes that we've heard about today. So what I'm wondering is perhaps you or your supporters or committee council could maybe work together to look at some of the existing constitutional components in Nebraska, see what's missing, see if there's perhaps a way to maybe modify some of the language that you put forward, or on the flip side, you know, do those provide any sort of bases for litigation presently? You know, thinking about the Montana case, from what I know, the provision kind of sat there in their constitution for some time, and then young activists came along and said, hey, let's breathe life into this. Let's test out and see what this means in the courts. And then they had successful effort at the trial court and at the state Supreme Court. So I'm just trying to kind of pull together what exists in the current context on some very similar themes, to see if maybe there's something that you or your supporters or lawyers working on this maybe want to think about or harmonize.
Yeah, and if I could just respond briefly to that, I think that it's a very good point that Pennsylvania and I think Montana both were there back in the 1970s and sat essentially unused for a number of years. My understanding from doing some research on this and speaking with people who are more experts in this area than I is that there's 30 plus states that actually have language in their state constitutions similar to what you're talking about we have here in Nebraska, which is referring to hunting, fishing, water access, things like that. Where we run into problems when it comes to the litigation is where those are placed in the Constitution, whether or not they are self-executing, meaning do we need to implement additional legislation to make them work, and then how do they interplay with other rights? And so what this, along with other green amendments that frankly have teeth, is they elevate it into the Bill of Rights. They create that individual right of action against the government doing these kind of things. And it really does ensure that there's actually standing and the ability to bring these lawsuits. And so certainly I would love to see what we can do with the language that already exists. But my fear is that because of where it's found in the Constitution, it doesn't present the same kind of protections that this would by placing it in the Nebraska Bill of Rights, essentially. So that would be, I think, what we can explore more. And I'll speak with some of the folks who were here today, who have done much more national research and see what we can tweak that already exists. But I do think that this is intended to provide the highest level of protection and ensure that individuals can really push back on government overreach in those ways.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And just in the interest of time, I'm just speaking very quickly and very generally. I understand that some of those provisions may be antiquated or dead letter or non-justiciable. I just generally speaking wanted to put the issue on the record. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Hughes?
I think it's a quick question.
With me, it's never quick. I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, that's true. When George goes, I'm going to be brief, you're like, oh, geez. You should start with like, it's going to be a really long answer, and then it'll be like one thing. No. You said other states, there's 3 to 10 lawsuits. If those lawsuits go through and there's a settlement, where does the money come from?
Well, I think you're conflating a constitutional suit against the government versus a civil suit, right?
Okay.
This is not suing a company.
I know, but when
And
you
so-
sue the government, what do you get? What are you suing for? It doesn't pay for lawyer fees?
Well, there's a number of different reliefs that you
I'm
can
not
ask
aware.
for. I mean, essentially what you're asking for is to enjoin the law and then make it essentially not go into effect, right? Like, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but the debate that we had this morning on the floor about whether or not a bill is constitutional or not, ultimately, if that's found unconstitutional, it wouldn't go into effect. The same way then, let's pretend the state of Nebraska passes a law that on its face is just throwing, bad for the environment, right? We're gonna, do something terrible. And then you bring a lawsuit saying you can't do that, it would stop that from going into effect.
Okay.
So that's essentially what we're asking for here. This is not gonna be damages and monetary remedies the way that you would get from like a civil suit, if that makes sense.
So none of those 3 to 10 cases had any.
I can't speak to the individual cases. I'm not an expert on what those cases were about or what the relief was that was being sought, but I just want to be very clear, there's a difference that we're talking about here from a person suing a company.
Right.
As opposed to bringing a constitutional claim where you're seeking to essentially invalidate a law because it violates the Constitution or your Bill of Rights as a Nebraskan.
Okay.
Senator DeKay.
Thank you. With this CA, do you think this helps put more awareness on some of the nitrate bills that are being brought forward this year? And with that being said, would the Clean Water Acts that we're dealing with and the nitrates and everything else that we're trying to clean up, would a CA be necessary at that point?
Well, I mean, first of all, to answer your first question, yes, I think this absolutely raises the profile of a lot of these issues, and we've heard that today from the testimony. A number of the folks that came in here today are concerned about nitrates in the water, concerned about having healthy, clean water, not necessarily pure, but clean water. It's an issue that we're going to keep talking about. I absolutely do think that this is still necessary, even if we continue to address that problem, because as I've said before, this presents a catch-all sort of provision that continues to protect these rights for every Nebraskan, and it also puts a protection in place that we don't always know what the future is going to bring. And so by putting this protection in place now, it protects us against future harm, so that way we're being proactive.
Can I stop you for a second? Thank you. Thank you to all the green shirts that are here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your testimony. Make sure to register to vote. Okay.
Always a good plug.
Please continue.
I was just going to say, this is more proactive, specifically, instead of reactive. And so while there's a number of things we can do to ensure we address that problem, this puts a framework in place to make sure that moving forward, we don't have the same problems that we've had in the past.
Off of Senator Klaus, real quick, what's the difference of pure water and clean water when it comes to, when we're talking about bottled water?
And that's, again, I'm open to having a conversation about the specific definitions. Like I said in my opening, a lot of what these definitions, where they're going to come from is case law. And there are a number of suits, I think, that have been brought in these other states, Montana, Pennsylvania, and New York, that deal with water quality. And so if implementing, using the word pure water is a problem and clean water is going to provide a little bit more flexibility, that happy to have that conversation. I don't know right now what the case law is around the difference between pure and clean, but these are the kind of questions that the judiciary can grapple with and certainly has grappled with in a number of other cases.
The only reason I bring that up, I had 2 different brands of bottled water in my car last week. And when it was as cold as it was, one of the brands of bottled water was froze hard as a rock. The other one was milky and not froze, and that was unopened bottle of water. So that's something we need to address too, maybe.
That is incredibly concerning, and I hope you threw that bottle of water out.
I don't want to scare anybody here, but I'm just living it, so.
I hope you tossed the bottle of water that was not frozen.
Yeah, that's.
All right, any other questions? With that, we will close the hearing on LR 22CA. I would ask the committee to stick around. We're going to have a short exec. Everybody else, I have to clear the room here. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.